All right, looks like I can use this microphone. I'm going to get started here. And again, my name's Lloyd Swartz. As I said, we own another business called Cabina Real Estate Holdings. And we develop off-grid subdivisions in Colorado and Idaho. It's sort of my next career, if you will. So part of my experiences from that are why I wanted to present this particular program. But also, I had some other experiences just sponsoring other CE classes, and I heard a couple of the folks talk about how litigation is such a big deal, particularly when it comes to rural land, vacant land, and people didn't disclose certain things, or the surveys are an issue. So a lot of you guys, how many of you guys have sold rural real estate? Be a home, a ranch, a farm. All right, so look, that's about half. So it's half of you guys have some experiences, but what I would say is that, yeah, it's not as common as selling homes in Albuquerque, but they're out there, right? And you are going to encounter selling rural land along the way. So I'm going to speak at different points. I'm going to be filling in some holes because one realtor stuck in the snow and couldn't make it. We had our survey guy cancel for something. So we've had a lot of changes here. We have our lenders here, though. That's great. So I'll be filling in some slots. Initially, what I just want to talk about for a few minutes is the point of view coming from a developer. Now, I'm not coming from a guy that's Pulte Homes. I'm not somebody who's developing thousands of acres and thousands of homes. I'm doing 50 to 1,000 acres at a time, and I'm doing off-grid large lots. But I think some of the principles will apply, and I think you're going to see people looking for something like that more than you're going to encounter the buyer that's buying 10,000 acres for Pulte Homes out in Rio Rancho and try to grid square it all together and get all those guys in Michigan that were sold those lots back in the 1970s together. So I want to talk about kind of what we do and some of the unique things that we come across. Again, there's lots of forms these subdivisions can take. And one of the things that you need to be aware of, because again, if somebody comes to you, we're going to talk about pre-qualifying buyers and say, I want to do a subdivision here. Well, can you? And biggest things I can takeaways I could tell you, it's going to depend on what they want to do. In other words, the smaller the acreage lots they're going to do, the more they're going to be required to do. 5 acres, many counties are like, you don't have to do nothing. At a tenth of an acre, you're putting in curb and gutter and pavement. So you have to decide, the developer has to know, okay, what level do I want to do at? And more than that, will it be approved? And will it be something the community wants? So there's a lot of questions that your potential developer needs to address. So understanding the level of development is a big one. And the other one I always recommend, I've gone up to Idaho to look at projects, and first thing I do is I go to the county planner. Every county has a planner. Sit down, take the temperature, look through their regulations together, tell them what you're proposing, and they will give you some feedback. I've done some very challenging permitting, but you have to know what you're getting into. So due diligence, as somebody mentioned, is really, really important, right? So if you're in that phase, you want to leave a longer period of time and make sure you do due diligence. So I'm going to hit on some of the key points. I'm sure others will talk about this as well. And I'm going to tell some stories throughout today just because I think it's more helpful than some of the just more down the facts, because if I give you a fact about developing in San Juan County, Colorado, that's going to be different than Rio Arriba, New Mexico. Big one's legal access. What does that legal access look like? And just those who don't know, there was a major litigation over that at Wolf Creek Ski Area, for them familiar about that. And there was kind of a bad court decision that came out of it, but it revolved around plowable roads. Can you do, people were buying the lots expecting to be able to plow them, and then, the county stepped in and said, no, you can't plow that road. And so there was a major incident over that. So you need to understand, can I maintain the road? Can I plow the road? Do I have legal access? If it's surrounded by private land, you got to figure that out, right? If you're going to be going across BLM, something like that, I'll talk about more of that at the end. That's going to be something. Mineral rights. If you don't own the mineral rights, a lot of times they won't let you develop the land. Just the way it is. And I know it's silly, but believe it or not, they do sell land without mineral rights. Water rights. If you're doing 5-acre lots, you can probably just drill a well. But if you're doing 1-2 acre lots, you're going to need water rights for that subdivision. So can you get water rights, or do they come with the property, which is ideal? Geological hazards I look for. In Colorado, I look for avalanche. My favorite one was a lady, new realtor posted a listing, put her sign, said, build your cabin here in the middle of the lot or the land. And it was in the middle of an avalanche run. Oh, by the way, it wasn't actually on the property either. So that's really important. Rock slides, landslides. There's a big deal in Utah where an entire subdivision recently got wiped out because the engineers were wrong about the landslide potential. So you think about rockfall. And by the way, there's some hazard videos on the state of Colorado's website. They're amazing. You won't believe the stuff. Like on rockfall, you'll see stuff that will make you just lose your mind. But anyway, so we're considering wetlands. Wetlands are a major deal. I own 2 Army Corps of Engineer permits. That's a big deal, right? And if you got to deal with wetlands, that's a whole nother can of worms. View shed. I mean, you know, some places they like want to make sure that the houses are screened. Is it a developer-friendly government? Are the subdivision's rules reasonable, but also are they flexible, right? In some counties are like, hey, we'll work with you. If it doesn't make sense to put a power to each lot for this particular subdivision, we'll work with you, right? If it doesn't make sense to do pavement out there, we'll work with you. Other counties are like, municipalities are like, hell no, you will do it just this way. So that's really important. Is it a place that people will want to live, right? I do my projects on waterways, always on rivers, streams, that sort of thing, because that's where people, in the wilderness, where people want to recreate. So you got to ask that question. You know, there's lots of failed developments on the outskirts of town that there wasn't really anything there to attract people, right? So that's a big question. And then price. What's it going to cost to develop this? By the time I do the infrastructure, the permitting, the roads, if I got to put in septic or sewer, or if I got to put in power or whatever, water, community water, am I going to make a profit? So those are the things that, you know, developers like me are looking for and talking about. And just one last thing, and before I pass it on, I'm going to give you another quick story. I tried to buy a ranch up in Idaho, and I ended up having an investor back out, so it killed the deal. It was a great deal. But one of the things there I was going to have to do was they had a horse farm, and they had a horse tour company. And they said part of the deal is these horses are very old. They were getting near the end of their life, anywhere from 6 months to 5 years left on their lifespans. Most of them average 2-3 years. They said, you will take care of them as part of the deal until they die, and they will stay on this land. How unique is that? That's not something you're going to get into here. It turned out for $10,000 or $12,000 a year, I could let somebody stay in a ranch house. The feed was already being grown on the farm. And they could simply, this person would stay there and so for free housing and feed the horses. It wasn't that big a deal, but that's the kind of unique situations you're going to get into with rural real estate. All right, guys, so one other thing I'll say, and I mentioned this to somebody a little bit earlier, is you'll hear some stories, but I actually look for realtors that don't know what they're selling because I know how to go in and look at it and figure out what it is. The problem is your seller loses out. So know what you're selling. Know what they need. Pre-qualify them. Make sure you understand what that property is and what the value is. And our realtor will get into that more. And so, guys, we are down to one realtor, as I mentioned. And we're going to give Rick Lopez the microphone. He is going to be doing basically the entire portion of the realtor portion for about 30 minutes. He's a real estate professional. It's done a lot of farms and ranches and that sort of thing. And he's going to have a lot of good information for you guys. So give him a warm welcome if you would.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming today and invite me to come be a part of your life for a brief moment. But it's an honor. It's an honor to be here with professionals. You know, Ronald Reagan once said that some people go through their entire lives wondering if they ever made a difference in the world. Realtors and brokers don't have that worry. You guys make a difference every single day because you guys have purpose. Know your purpose, but don't ever forget your why. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so now we're kind of going through a tough time. Interest rates are a little high. People are a little jittery with the market. People are kind of pulling back and holding off a little bit on their money. So you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do to attract? What am I going to do to attract that customer? Where is a market that I haven't really explored? Ask yourself that. I'm going to throw one out at you right now. How many of you guys think about marketing yourself and your business to veterans? We have three military installations. We have a giant, the largest land army installation just south of us. And most of it is actually in New Mexico, but Fort Hood claims right there by Texas. But so we have people every single day transitioning out of the military. They go from civilian life to military life, and many of them, they want to start a new career, a new life. And the largest group of people that are entering rural homesteading, entering rural farming and ranching is the American veteran. I work for the USDA. I work out of Washington. I'm a U.S. beginning farmer and rancher coordinator. I deal with beginning farmers and ranchers all day long. And they come to me, Rick, I don't know how to start a farm. I don't know how to ranch, but man, I sure want to learn. You can develop your own niche by getting all the questions that they're going to have already discovered and in your head. Well, let me tell you about New Mexico, guys. Why New Mexico is such a great place to buy? Because the majority of New Mexico, now, if you want to grow cranberries, New Mexico is not the place. I'll give you a secret, right? You know, there's a reason why. But you're going to get that veteran getting out and he's just full of vinegar and he's full of energy and he's going to come up to you and say, my God, I saw an episode of Yellowstone and I want to own a ranch. And you're like, oh boy, here we go. Because I get those calls. I get those calls all day long, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you know, you never want to break the spirit of a man or a woman. Never. So you listen to them. I always say, you know, there's an old saying, and if you're a sewer or if you're a carpenter, is to measure twice, cut once, right? So you don't screw up. I always say, especially with veterans, listen twice and speak once. Every veteran has a story. Every man has a novel inside of them. Sometimes it just needs to come out. But you will learn so much from him telling you his novel. And then when you get out there, you're saying, okay, how do I find that right piece of property? Well, you're out there, you're talking to a farmer, right? And he's got this ready-made farm. It's got barns, it's got tractors, it's got an alfalfa field, he's got 50 acres of alfalfa, he's got listed down there what he pays in taxes every year, what his sales are, he gets 4 cuttings a year, and you're thinking, oh, this is perfect. But if you don't go in there and listen to him, you'll never, ever be his realtor. because he's having to sell for a reason. Maybe age, maybe a disability, maybe a family emergency. But he's having to sell. And if you do not listen, and if you don't sit there and listen and pull that information out of his heart, how are you going to find out why this man is selling and why is it so important? Because when you have that veteran or you have that guy coming in from the city, and if he's not prepared and he goes and he talks to that seller, you can lose the deal. If you get an investor and you're thinking, oh, I got this investor and I got this great piece of property, it's going to be an easy close. That's my purpose. And if you go in there with no why, you're going to lose. You're going to lose every single time. And that's the beauty that I see. You know, on Facebook, I see, I don't know, for some reason, I have a lot of realtors as friends. And every one of those realtors, though, always talk about their why. What makes them tick? What makes their job enjoyable? You know, they say that every business, you know, you get burnout. All of a sudden you're showing places, you're spending your Saturdays every Saturday showing a property, and you just hit this drought and you just can't make that sale. And you're getting burnout. We've all gone through that, no matter what we do. And all of a sudden, nobody ever gets burnout based on their purpose. They get burnout based on the fact that they forgot their why. Because if you always have your why in you, you're going to keep thinking, how do I think outside the box? How do I expand? How do I grow? How do I hit this other market over here? And you're going to find that niche. And you're going to find out what makes you that rock star. And you get into it. Now, we're going to be having these great experts coming up here speaking about different programs and whatnot. You know, the USDA is a tremendous source. If you're just selling a home in rural America, rural development offers some of the best loan programs. You know how tough it is to finance a single-wide mobile home? It's like pulling teeth, right? I'd rather go to the dentist, man, trying to find that finance. But did you know that rural development will do that for you? Not only will they finance that home, but they'll actually pay for the infrastructure to be put in, that septic tank. They'll pay for that water line to be put in out there. They got programs for solar wells. And then you got the Farm Service Agency that's going to help them buy that farm. Guess what, guys? It's zero down. The Farm Service Agency will pay for the appraisal. Now we have this limit of $600,000, which $600,000 is not going to buy a lot today. But so we have partners. One of them, Paul Carrica, my good friend, will be speaking to you about their programs and their lending programs and whatnot. But one of the things that the Farm Service Agency offers is we can do a down payment loan for that buyer. If he's coming in and he wants to get into agriculture, he's got 3 years of experience, farm management experience, and he needs to come up with $450,000 as a down payment, and he's going to say, well, what the hell? I ain't got that kind of money. But we can help you. And Farm Credit will get you processed quick. They'll make it happen. Ag New Mexico, any lender that does agriculture will help you. But don't be afraid to look into www.usda.gov, beginning farmers, and talk and learn about all the different possibilities that they have to offer. So you want to market yourself. Let me tell you a great idea. How do I get to the veterans? Anybody ever heard of Boots to Business? You're a veteran. Outstanding. Thank you for your service. Boots to Business is a program offered by the Veteran Business Outreach Center, and each state has a Veteran Business Outreach Center, the VBOC, and it's sponsored by the Small Business Administration. And they offer Boots to Business programs every quarter. That means every quarter they're at Kirtland Air Force Base, they're at Cannon Air Force Base, they're out there in Alamogordo, and what they do is they put a 2-day course on there on building and teaching entrepreneurship for military service members that are getting out. Now, 2 things. You can either try to get on the agenda with them, or you could just be in there and sit down and talk to them. And you hear somebody talking about, I'm looking at buying a farm. Hey, here's my card, let's talk. Get into the market. Think outside the box. Go to where they are at. You know, if you spend all your day in Albuquerque, you're not going to sell out in Estancia where I have my ranch. It ain't going to happen. Farmers don't operate like that. Farmers talk all at the coffee club in the morning, and they're saying, hey, I'm thinking about selling my farm. Who can I talk to? And they're going to say, oh, man, you know, old Lucy just down the road. Her brother, I think, is in real estate. Get out there to that coffee shop. Introduce yourself. Drop off a few cards. Because you know what? It's kind of like fishing, right? You could cast that rod all day long, and bam, you got one. And then you get another one, and you get another one. And before you know it, you're rural America. You own that market. But that's how you begin. That's how you start. But to do it, guys, let me give you a tip. It's going to sound kind of harsh, but it's a tip. Use it wisely. Don't go into a market that you know nothing about. Don't go in. I remember I was selling my dad's house out there in McIntosh, New Mexico, and the buyer's realtor came over, and pretty gal, probably in her 30s, short mini skirt, high heels, walking through a field. And I'm like, oh, I'm really impressed here. And she knew she was coming out to the country, you know? And so she was looking around, and she didn't know any of the questions to ask. So I was asking her the questions that she should ask, and she's starting to catch on here. I said, because you have to go back to that buyer, and they're going to have these questions. If you're not used to talking about wells, whether it's a drinking well, whether it's a livestock well, or whether it's an irrigation well. And if you're talking about an irrigation well, what are water rights? What do water rights mean? I get that all the time, and I get people all the time saying, Rick, I bought this 40 acres of land, and I want to grow chili, I want to grow tomatoes, I want to grow all that. So how many acre feet of water rights do you have? And they're like, what do you mean? Ruh-roh, we got a problem here. Know so you can best represent your buyer. Know these questions going. And if you don't know water rights, it's no big deal. But if you want to get into a market that is largely open, do your homework. Learn your purpose, and your why will follow. It's all about marketing who you are. When you walk up to that customer, what is going to set you apart from everybody else? I remember one time I was applying for a job with the government, and I applied and I made the cut, and I was waiting for the interview. And I called up DC and I said, hey guys, are you guys going to have interviews or what? And they said, man, Rick, we're sorry, but 761 people applied for that job you applied for. And I'm like, oh, great, the one job that I want. Everybody and their brother wants it too, you know. So a couple months later, I get this call. Hey, Rick, you still interested in this job? I said, yeah. They said, be there Thursday for an interview. So here I am. But I'm asking myself, how am I going to separate myself from all these other people that are going to be interviewing? How do I not get lost into the shuffle? Same question you want to ask yourself. Amongst all the realtors out there, how do I stand out? How do I not get lost in the shuffle? I thought to myself, they always in an interview, do you have any questions before we begin? I came out, I don't have a question, but I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to be the change I want to see in the world. And they're like, whoa. We went through the interview, I elaborated, it went well, and I thought, hell, if I don't get this job, I know I aced the interview. So then at the end of the interview, they ask, well, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close out? I came up with another quote, and I got that wow. You ever been in an interview and somebody says, wow? You know you got them hooked. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, I get that call with a job offer. Market yourself to the best of your strengths. Be the most educated person in there. Have the most common sense. Do your homework. Have empathy for that farmer or rancher on why he's selling. Walk in there with confidence so that buyer says, this person is the right one and is going to take care of me. Because, guys, I get calls from all over, and even from New Mexico, and it's kind of nice. Because I live here, but I work for D.C. So every once in a while, I'll get a call from New Mexico, and I was like, oh, cool, this is from New Mexico, right? Hope it's not bad. And so they have questions. They have millions of questions, beginning farmers and ranchers. And then today, now you're pretty young, so don't get offended at me, okay? But young people today, they don't know a damn thing about how to research and look at things. If it's not on Google, they ain't got a clue. And they're saying, well, can you show me? Can you show me? They want to be a farmer and they don't know. I have no idea where to begin. So we have to be able to, see, you're smiling, so I'm okay. Thank you. We have to be able to adapt ourselves to the incoming market, and that's the market. We have to be able, I wear my hat because I got so much frost up on my rooftop, you know. You guys will all start guessing my age, and you're going to say, my God, this guy should be 6 foot under already. But no offense to you, though, but I'd rather have some frost than lose my shingles, okay? That's all. No offense. Guys, listen. You can go into a brand new market with veterans, boots to business, VA loans, Farm Service Agency, agricultural loans. We have preferred lenders that offer great and quick turnaround. It's all out there. Speak to the people here in New Mexico with the Boots to Business program in VBOC. Talk to them. Be friends with them. Because all of a sudden they may get that call and they're saying, you know what, I've been talking to this great realtor. Give him a call. Guess what? You just reeled in another one. You know, McDonald's didn't make its millions and billions and billions and trillions of dollars by selling a $250 steak. They started by selling a 49-cent hamburger, 25-cent fries, and 10-cent drink, and selling, and selling, and selling. I know I'm aging myself, so you don't have to sit there and think that I'm really that old, okay? But guys, take what you have. Take your gifts. Find out what your strengths are. Adapt them. Find out what your purpose is. Your purpose in selling real estate is to be able to, is simply being able to put food on your table. Your why is to be able to make a difference in that man, lady, couple's lives. That's your why. You know, every farmer gets up every day, and I love it. I love it on Facebook where these people live in the city and they're saying, oh my God, did you see this sunrise this morning? It's the most incredible thing. And a farmer's sitting there saying, hell, I see that every morning, man. I'm waiting for the damn thing to go up so I can feed my chickens and not bump my head. And then they talk about the sunset. Oh my God, I mean, New Mexico has incredible sunsets, don't they? But that farmer's still out there in the same field watching the sun go down. He's saying, hurry up and go down so I can go inside and get dinner. That's the people you're dealing with. The salt of the earth. You people have purpose. During tough times, find your why, and you will be successful. You are successful because you chose an honorable career. You're successful because you're sitting here today. Now thrive. Take your purpose and find your why and make a difference in the world today. Thank you guys very much.
All right, thank you, Rick. How many here, real quickly, have heard of Evergreen Hills? Would you believe that is an off-grid subdivision, 10 minutes off tramway on this side of the mountains? So the emphasis I want to put is rural real estate's not as far away as you think. We live off-grid. I live up there. We have no utilities. But when we talk about pre-qualifying people, we see people move in the first winter when they realize their little car isn't going to make it up and down that rutted road and they're not going to be able to get out in a snowstorm. They're gone. When they realize they need a pickup truck to haul their garbage to the city, we don't even have trash service up there. That's only 10 minutes off a tramway. But the other thing I want to say, a couple other things, is if you ever want to learn more about that, feel free to come on up. Well, I can definitely, show you around and give you an idea of what a community is like that is like that. But again, when you're talking to folks, make sure they're going to be okay, with that kind of lifestyle, because when you're selling those homes in Evergreen Hills, what you're going to find is they're kind of a slow mover. Everybody comes up there like, oh, the road was bumpy, they turn around and leave. Oh, crap. And then somebody will come up and go, there's a waterfall there, a creek there, I can walk out my house, there's no HOA, and they're going to buy it instantly. So when you find the right buyer for these rural pieces of property, they're going to buy it. Boom, they're done. Just sign on the line. But just realize it's going to take a little longer. Okay, guys, next thing we're going to get into is inspections, because obviously there's some different aspects when you're talking about inspecting a property that's in a rural location versus in a city. And Michelle with Beyond Inspections is going to kick this off. Okay, I think we need to hook up your thing, flip it over wherever she showed you. Sorry. All right, somebody to the rescue. I forgot about that. She has a little PowerPoint. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, there we go. That took forever.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Michelle Castaneda with Beyond Inspections Service. And we have discovered, our inspectors have discovered that we have a lot of rural property in New Mexico, and doing those inspections is very different from doing the inspections here in the city. The guys report back, they have a lot of knowledge. They get a lot of certifications that help them get through these rural properties. And so one of the things that we first learn about is the difference between a commercial property in the rural New Mexico and a residential property in rural New Mexico. A commercial property, they are there for profit. And the people that you deal with, the investors that you deal with, are going to be looking at a very different type of inspection. Lloyd talked about due diligence, and due diligence is one of those types of inspections that you would do for commercial properties. For residential properties, a lot of our rural areas have either manufactured homes or modular homes. And both manufactured homes and modular homes require different certifications. They have different rules and regulations for how those foundations are established for a modular home or I lose my place, sorry. A modular home or a manufactured home. Engineers are required to look at the foundations for modular homes and manufactured homes. I don't know why I can't remember that. Anyway, and we talked about well inspections and the different types of wells that are going to be out there. Beyond Inspections will do the well inspections for you. What you need to know is that in a rural area, there may be a shared well or a cistern on the well. And if there's a cistern or if it's a shared well, there's no way for us to be able to perform a flow test because we're going to run hundreds of gallons of water out of that well. And if there's a cistern, obviously we're emptying the cistern and we're not getting to the bottom of the well. If it's a shared well, your neighbors are going to be upset because we've run the water out of that well and dried it up. So it has to be a private well. We are going to run the flow test, run hundreds of gallons of water out of it. We're going to check the pump. We're going to look at the mechanics of the well. We're going to look at the distance, the safety distances from contamination in that well. We work with Hall Environmental Testing in order to do the water testing for those wells. Water testing comes in all kinds of packages. It starts anywhere from $250 for a basic water test, and it'll go all the way up to $650. And you're looking at bacteria, you're looking at E. coli, you're looking at lead. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that can be found in those wells. And like I said, we do go through Hall Environmental, who is also now Eurofins. It's a local lab, and those water samples get submitted to that lab for the reports. Rural homes have alternative heating and cooling units. It's not our regular HVAC systems that you see here in the city. The heat pump systems and electric systems may not have any gas, so they're all run on electric, and they move heat rather than create heat, so that they're not necessarily good for extreme cold weather, but it works well here in our New Mexico desert. You can also have boilers. They see a lot of boilers in the rural areas for indirect water heaters. Another inspection that you'll want to look at is termites and WDO. I heard a realtor say the other day, if you don't have termites now, you will. And so WDO is wood-destroying organisms, and our weather in New Mexico is a huge wood-destroying organism. But there are all kinds of insects out there that will help destroy the wood that's on our homes and cause a problem. So you'll want to have the termite and wood-destroying organism inspection done. if you're looking for mice, squirrels, birds, those kinds of items, if it's obvious, if we see droppings, that will be in an inspection report. But it's not always obvious. If the squirrels are in the walls, you're not necessarily going to see any kind of evidence of squirrels. So that requires a critical pest inspection, and Beyond Inspections is not certified to do critical pest. You'll need to go to a regular pest company that does treatment in order to get the critical pest test. Sewer lines are another problem that you would see out in rural areas. And we do inspect those sewer lines that go to the septic tank. However, it is necessary that the septic tank be cleaned out before we can do the sewer line. Otherwise, we won't be able to get through the sewer line with the inspection. It's also, and I know Lloyd's going to talk about this, it's also important that septic tank get emptied and get certified before you sell the property. Lloyd?
Yeah, I'll jump in with a few thoughts on the septic. Of course, age is a consideration. The older it is, probably the more concern we're going to have. Also, if you get somebody out there to look at a septic that's functioning and full, it is amazing. You call even one of these pumpers out, they can look at it and tell from the pond scum, the level, and everything, and tell you exactly how that system is performing. So that could be an advantage if you're going to get it pumped or you want to get it looked as a part of a pre-inspection. Have a pumping service even just come out, because they really, I had mine looked at after 3 years, and I was like, why am I here? But it's really, they're really good at telling you how that system's performing. A couple other things to be aware of is, in 2008, they changed it. You have to have a 3/4 of an acre lot now to put in a traditional septic system. So what you're seeing is there's a lot of lots out there for sale in some of these older subdivisions, including mine, that don't meet that standard. Now, there are still advanced systems, and what I want to tell you is these advanced systems are growing in popularity with the bureaucrats and environmental agencies. In Colorado, we're seeing almost a total switch to these hybrid systems. There's a couple different. The one I use at my house, because I lack of space, just has a tank, no leach field, and it works through evaporation. But even those are now being phased out in favor of the ones where you have a tank and there's an aerator and it treats it through aeration. And then there's an absorption area around it. The big thing to know there, if you're talking to somebody, when you're looking at building, say, off-grid, let's say somebody's trying to buy a lot and they're going to build a custom home. It's very expensive. Now these $10,000, $12,000 septics are becoming $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. I'm going to pay about $35,000 for one in Colorado. So that's really the big difference. Now, used to be these hybrid systems required power. However, they can be done now with a siphon, so you no longer have to have power. And the problem with that is if you're off grid, you got limited capacity with your solar system, that becomes a problem. Luckily, now they have systems where you don't have to. But again, just expect you're going to pay pay for a lot of money for doing that. And, when you're thinking about off-grid, you also do well. That's $20,000+, right? Depending on how deep you go, it could be a lot more. So then you add in, if you're going to do a solar system, let's say there is no grid tie system. Now that's going to be probably 50, 60 grand. Although it has come down a little bit recently, it's still very expensive. It's very expensive proposition. So, and a septic inspector will potentially do a load test to see if a leach field is performing or not. That's one thing to look at. Has it been clogged up with roots? Has somebody driven over it? We had somebody pick it up at a job that actually drove into one that was abandoned. Apparently the grandkids were supposed to fill it in with dirt. They just put a board over it. So it's actually, abandoned septic tanks are kind of a headache too, because it's kind of good to know. So if you've got records, the seller knows about how it was done, when it was last pumped up, are there any abandoned ones on site? I think that's really good information that you should be gathering when you're setting up a new listing. But other than that, it's really not that big a deal. It's just really inspecting it. The big deal becomes if the system is really old and it's failing. Now what? Now you're going to have a really unhappy seller because they've got to replace that system for tens of thousands of dollars. And you also have to remember, too, if it's a traditional system, not a hybrid, a hybrid system is very flexible. But if you've got a leach field type system, you're going to have a replacement place. What if you don't have replacement place? And that's where it starts to get really tricky. And so in case of my place up here on the side of Sandias, there's no replacement room. That's why I had to do a hybrid. And so those are just some thoughts on septics. We had a guy that was going to come, but it was one of the ones that canceled. The other thing on rule inspections I want to talk about is solar. I know you're not encountering that every day. The reason I want to speak about it, because even the home inspectors have no idea what to do with that. I'm going to start with the fact, if you have an off-grid home with solar, the solar adds no value to the home. Let's get that out of the way. That is your connection to the grid. That is how you're powering your home. There's no added value unless somebody thinks they're going to be green, and we can argue about that because it's not really that green. But I do it because I wanted to live next to Albuquerque. I wanted to be next to a waterfall at 7,000 feet. I'm going to do it in Colorado because I want to be at 10,000 feet along the Animas and watch the choo-choo train go by. That's why I do it. I don't do it to be green or anything, or be affordable or cheaper, because it's simply not. When I purchased my property in Evergreen Hills in 2005, you would pick what hour of the day you would watch TV. And you would use oil lamps, maybe. You'd figure out what day of the week in the middle of the day you would start your washing machine. That was 2005. By the time I built in 2017, a lot of that was a thing of the past. However, I still woke up in the morning not knowing if I have enough power for the coffee maker. It's now, that was 2017, it's 2025. I could run 2 swamp coolers all night. We'll have 4 computers going nonstop. We have 3 refrigerators. I have a neighbor that charges a Tesla in his garage during the days. Now, he doesn't drive it far, to be fair. Not recommended. I'm going to go not recommend it. My neighbor has a hot tub. He has 2 Airbnbs. That is how much has changed. So the real critical thing to know, solar has changed. For 50 years, it didn't change at all. Now it's changing every day. Some of that's being driven by green energy interests. Some of it's driven by just cell towers needing power, things, emergency power, things like that. But regardless, so the biggest shifts have been, of course, more efficient equipment, more efficient panels. When I designed my home, I designed an entire room for the equipment. That went down to just a wall. And now if I do it again, it will literally just be one little box on the wall. So, big difference. It's become not, can I make coffee in the morning? It's, how many days can I go without sunshine? So if you have dark skies, let's say monsoon season or middle of winter for 4 or 5 days, can you get through without running a backup generator? And most homes will have a backup generator, and it's still recommended. So I can go about 5 days without sunlight on lithium iron phosphate batteries. Put those in a few years ago. We literally never even look at we never look at the meter to see how much power we have anymore. So now the next shift is, okay, I got enough power. It's like, how do I start switching appliances over to electric? Like I have a gas dryer. When it burns out, It's going to electric, right? So now it becomes, how can I cut the propane down? By putting the better batteries in, I now don't have to run that generator. I save about $2,000 a year just on propane because I don't run the generator anymore when it was hot out or when it was cloudy out. And because panels are more efficient and put out more now, the other thing that's really cool is on those days like this where you get scattered clouds, it used to be really hard to charge up your batteries. But now because you have so much reserve, you can actually accomplish that. So if you're looking at a system with someone or an inspector is, what do you want to look at? The age of the system. If those panels are 20, 25 years old, and you're going to encounter these really derelict old systems, their efficiency is way down, right? And it's probably not going to take care of what somebody wants to see in their home. How old is the equipment? The inverter, the charge controllers. Those have come along a little bit recently, and now you can access them via your cell phone and see what's going on. It's pretty amazing. And then most importantly is the batteries. Nobody should be selling a home today without lithium iron phosphate batteries. If you're seeing lead acid, nobody's going to be happy because they only last 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 if you're a miser, and you really take care of them. You have to fill them with water. You have to equalize them. You got to do all kinds of crazy stuff, and the voltage tends to drop. Even the newer 2-volt deep cycle batteries have just, they didn't deliver. Lithium iron phosphate, on the other hand, you forget you have batteries. It's 12, 15 years. They're in there, you don't even worry about it. So you should be, at this point, seeing homes that include that. So it's not so much it adds value to the home, but if you have a derelict old solar system that's going to cost $50,000 to upgrade, that's something, a potential buyer needs to know if a seller's not going to upgrade that system. But the good news is, as these systems get upgraded, that's less of a problem. One other thing to mention is generally you do not want the solar on the roof. You can have extra on the roof, but you need ground mount arrays that you can clean off in the snow, adjust a couple of times a year. Otherwise, you lose about 75% of your production. So you can have both, but you definitely want, and again, to be clear, we're talking about off-grid. That means be clear, there's no grid connection. People add solar to their roofs here, or they get a $40,000 bill, they pay interest on it for 30 years until the equipment's completely worn out and hoping they'll save some money. I think we all kind of have some doubts on that. But the point is that's very different because they have a grid connection as a backup. I am specifically talking about where there is no backup. That is it. It's your only source. It is pretty reliable, in case you're wondering. Inverters do burn out. Circuit breakers blow. But I can tell you in 8 years, I've never had any major failures. So it is really interesting because they'll be like, oh, power's out in town half the day. And you're like, oh, really? Didn't know that. And it is for some people. I like that fact. I'll always have unlimited power and water. I love it. So again, to the right buyer, it really is can be absolutely an asset. So, all right, guys, I think that is most of what I have on sewer and water. We're doing pretty good on time. We're going to try to take most of our questions at the end. We've reserved kind of a long period at the end. So, if you can hold your questions till the end, we'll have lots of time to network and answer some questions at the end. Really kind of unlimited, essentially. So the next thing I'm going to cover after that is I'm going to talk briefly about surveys. I have Michael Glass. I think a lot of you guys know him. He does classes. He was unable to attend at the last moment also. But I'm going to talk just a little bit about the importance of surveys and right-of-ways and why it matters. So I gave you the example of the sign in the middle of the avalanche run that wasn't even on a property. So when I shop for property, the first thing I do is I disregard the real estate sign on rural real estate. Now if it's just a lot, right? Okay, a lot, we'll be pretty sure that it's most of the time, I assume the realtor sign is nowhere near the property. Does that sound crazy? And most of the time, it's true. Now for your tech tip of the day. Who here has Onyx Off-Road? All right. Not a lot of you. Download it. It is incredible. When you're looking at a ranch, where's the property? I don't care if there's a survey or not. Where's the property? I said, over that ridge, on this side of the ridge, you got a buyer they're asking. Download Onyx Off-Road. Is it 100% accurate? No, but damn is it getting close. It not only does it show Jeep trails and hiking trails, it also shows the property boundaries. And oh, by the way, ownership of those boundaries. So you didn't sit there walking, oh, looks like the property boundary's about right here. I mean, plus or minus a few meters anyways, right? Very, very helpful. Onyx Off-Road. Yes. Yeah, and they have different versions. You just want the basic Onyx Off-Road. You don't need the hunt or because that one that tells you where the hunting leases are and all that stuff too. There's a lot of programs out there. This is not the only one, but this is the one that's sort of taken the lead. This is so useful. I use it all the time when I'm looking at rural real estate and walking land. Because then I go, oh, hey, wait a minute. That real estate side's over there. Land's really over here. Yeah, for hiking. It works great for hiking, four-wheeling. Some people use it for like river rafting stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of uses. But what's funny is that developed as a recreational thing, it actually works as a profession. So when you go out in the middle of nowhere, you'll find a lot of people that are using these programs. Or this program, I should say. The other thing I'll do is I'll just call up a surveyor and say, man, I'm a little worried about this piece of property. Can I pay you for a day to go out there and kind of do a general confirmation of where I think the property is? And why is that important? Access, we talked about access. What if it doesn't line up right for access? You know, I got a project right now and kind of a realtor that had no idea where things were at. I tried to buy some really bad land because I figured I could add on and make a bigger project. He said, no, you can't have that land for that price because it has a waterfall. It's worth more. I said, but that piece of land is a waterfall. So what are you going to do with a waterfall? You can't build on a waterfall. So I ended up buying the rest of the land for pennies on the dollar. But as he said, well, you can't get access, so who cares? By the time the closing was over in October, I already had a traffic study done and a BLM right-of-way permit initiated. So it does matter where that property is. Do you have access to the creek? Do you have, is that wellhead really on this property? Is that nice green pasture on this property? So knowing where it's at, and here's the thing, nobody surveys rural land. If I had a recommendation for every seller, hire a damn surveyor. Is it expensive? Yes. It's not surveying a single lot. It is, I spend $15,000, $20,000 a year on surveyors. It's not cheap, but it adds so much more value to the buyers knowing where those property boundaries actually are. And by value, 20, 30, 40, 50% more money? I'm not joking. Because when you don't know where the boundaries are, how much are you willing to pay? Well, I think it's over here. Well, okay, you think it's over there. You know, so having a survey is really critical. I know a lot of your sellers are going to be like, oh, I don't want to pay $5,000 or 10 or 15 grand. It's so worth it. It's like everything when you're selling real estate. Can I add enough value with this that it will offset what we're spending? If I replace the carpets, if I shampoo the carpets, if I put some paint on that weird wall I saw yesterday where the kid had shot it up with paintball guns. Yes, in a high-end home. Anyways, so that is one way you can really bring some value and to these properties. So again, talking a little bit about right-of-ways, as it relates to that too. If you don't know where the property is, you're going to kind of have trouble moving on to that. So some issues with right-of-ways, it could be across private land. So a question, is there a right-of-way or an easement in existence? Is it on the survey? Well, it's probably not a survey, so there's your answer. Or do they have something? You know, one of the things I did with a project recently is I just sent a blast email to all my neighbors, said, hey, I just bought this land. What do you guys need? Actually, you know, I had several requests for easements, which I did. Because that helps smooth the project over, helps move it through the county when they know I'm taking care of my neighbors. And a lot of, for me, developing land is about how do I work with the neighbors? What do my neighbors need? And how can I smooth things over with them so they approve, so they don't go out and say, no, we're against this project. Never had anybody speak out against a project in a committee meeting. I've watched committee meetings where there's lines of people ready to scream and yell. And so there's a right and a wrong way to do development. And so that's one way, because if you go in there and say, I even had one come up that did actually, I did have sort of a negative comment. And they said, listen, Leonard, we're concerned because we want access to our mine still, and he doesn't have anything there for access to our mine. Well, Dad bought the wrong piece of property. The mine's on my property. She wasn't too happy about that. But anyways, those are the sort of things you come across. So if it's across private land, do you have an easement? Can you get an easement? Can you get a right-of-way? I ran to one beautiful property on the Salmon River in Idaho. There was no way. The neighboring landowner was like, no, we'll take you to court. We'll fight you. We are not ever going to give that property a right-of-way. Could you get it with enough lawyer fees? Probably eventually, maybe. And then there are certain laws, and they're going to vary per area. Like if there's a driveway or a roadway there and it's been in existence in contemporary use, sometimes you can claim that you have access through that. But again, it's not written into the rule books here. It's not, it's not on the survey. Then you're hanging your hat on something that is potentially, going to be a litigious problem down the road, right? Then you have, generally, if you have access from, let's say, a county road, you can go right off a county road. You're usually golden, right? Because that is a public roadway. What if it's a BLM road or a Forest Service road? You actually have to go to them, even though it's an existing road in use, and get an actual right-of-way from the BLM or the Forest Service. And you also have to figure out, was that road inventoried? And was it inventoried into the system by any of these agencies? If it wasn't, it gets progressively a little bit harder. If it is an existing road, you're probably going to get permission. But a buyer needs to know that they're going to have to go through this, right? So in the case of the one, my newest project in September that I purchased, they were like, well, you can't get it. I'm like, okay, well, why can't you get access? I can tell you that Highway 550 entrance is perfectly fine. I don't need an engineer to tell me that. You land a 747 on a shoulder. I'm pretty sure you can pull a car over and get off the road safely. And they're like, well, and so what they did is they went to BLM and they said they just wanted to get a letter saying it was okay. And they didn't want to go pay the $7,000 for the traffic study. Well, that's all required, is to go through the actual process. So sometimes it's not that you can't get access, it's just nobody wants to do the heavy lifting, just like they didn't want to pay for the survey. They don't want to do the heavy lifting of getting all that. When you start working with land management agencies and stuff, it is quite challenging. The Forest Service is horrific. Think Armageddon. Think years and years and years in court to get anything done. BLM is a lot easier. And I'm just giving that as a general heads up from my experiences. They do not have to grant a right-of-way or easement. What it says is they have to, by statute, make every effort to provide that access. But they may just say, well, you got a bicycle trail over there, that's good enough. And you're like, no, wait a minute, I need to build a house, I can't do it from a bike trail. They can fight you on that. So you want to grease the wheels? You want to do what you can. In my case, they said, hey, did you see that world-class bouldering area over there? I said, I did. Oh, well, the climbing guides really want to use that. I said, okay, well, will you accelerate my permit? And they're like, yeah. All right. What about rent? Did you know if you get a right-of-way across BLM and Forest Service, you pay rent for the road? It's not a lot of money. Okay, it might be $300, $1,000, few thousand a year. So it's not a ton of money, but you're required to pay rent because you're using the public's, even though you're going to be maintaining it and everything, who knows? I mean, you're getting an advantage or a benefit from public land. So keep that in mind. Now they said, well, you're going to do that boulder area, we're not going to charge you your rent either. Well, yeah, perfect. So, and these are the kind of things that go on behind the scenes that you don't generally see. But if you're advising a client's like, well, I want to build houses here, or a house, or it might be that I've seen existing houses without legal access. And when you go to get any kind of permit or do anything nowadays with most counties in particular, they're going to say, hell no, you prove to us you have legal access. They're very adamant. And some of that has come from litigation over the years. Now let's just say there's no road there and you need to just blaze a road across public lands. Let me tell you what, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. As it is, on this one project, they walked down there and said, oh, there's a mine down there. Oh, I bet this existing road must have been a railroad grade at one time. We need to bring an archaeologist out. I'm like, what? You can clearly see there's nothing. And then Doge fired the archaeologist, by the way, so we're working on that this summer. Figuring out how we're going to deal with that. But the point is, even just getting a right-of-way over existing property can have challenges. But if you start looking at getting a road maybe cut into a parcel that's cut off, and I'll guarantee the price is going to be awesome on that property if it has no legal access, right? Yeah, it's a good price. What's it going to take? That'd be part of that due diligence. You know, it's kind of like buying commercial, I think, as was pointed out. You want a very long 45, 60, 90-day due diligence period, maybe even, to work out, do I have mineral rights? Do I have water rights? Do I have access? If I don't, what's it going to take to get those things that are missing? If I got to run a power line, what's that going to cost me? Or is solar okay? So it's all these sorts of things that just require a heck of a lot more pre-planning thought when you're dealing with rural real estate. It's fun, it's great, it's an avenue, it's another thing to sell, but at the same time, guys, there is, there's a lot more to take into consideration. So those right-of-ways are very important. The surveys are very important. Know the status. If you got to sell it without a right-of-way or without a survey, fine, but make sure you're disclosing that. Make sure your people that are buying know these issues. And if you can encourage your buyer to do a survey or fix a right-of-way issue. I mean, my gosh, if you add $500,000 to the value of the land, why wouldn't you? But as we know, we can't convince every seller to do that. But if you can, let's do that. I think it's about all I have, actually, on those two issues. And again, we're going to answer a lot. I know there's a lot of material we're covering. We'll have plenty of time at the very end to actually take questions, and everybody will remain up here. So the last presentation I'm going to do is on lending, and we've got two lenders here, USDA and Rural First representation here. And I counted Rural First at another, I think it was a GAP meeting or something. And it's very cool, because what I can tell you is, in Evergreen Hills, I've seen people go through 700 lenders just to get a loan, because it's evil and it's off-grid. Keep in mind, Fannie Mae doesn't care if it's off-grid. Let's get that out of the way. They actually sent out a notice about that. Doesn't matter. It's a nightmare, because the underwriters don't care. If you got comps, they're like, hey, let's go. But the guys, they're initiating the mortgage, are, oh, off-grid, that's a mud hut. We can't do that. And so the national reaction can be very negative to off-grid. Rural vacant land, not everybody loans on that. Not everybody will do a construction loan. Rural First has got some amazing programs you're going to hear about that very few others offer. So for me as a subdivision developer, I have almost no options. Literally, I got one guy in New York. I found one bank in northern Idaho that'll lend on vacant land for subdivision purposes. So keep in mind, that's very different than lending on a home on vacant land. It's very different than lending on a farm. It's very different from, I want to build a new home construction on vacant land. And so what you find is there's a whole new myriad of issues when you're going to be trying to get financing for rural property. And so this is a very important aspect of selling rural land, is how is my client going to get funding? Because they're not going to get it from pocket, what do they call it, pocket mortgage? Whatever that is. The one, anyways, they're not going to get it from them. Let's put it that way. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it over to these guys. You guys want to just present from up there? Sure, all right. You want to introduce yourself and decide who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Can everybody hear me okay? If I need to scoot this, there we go. Now I can hear myself. My name is Gabriel Baeza. I am a senior loan officer for Rural First, which is part of Farm Credit Mid-America. So anybody familiar with the Farm Credit system out there? Don't? Oh, got two. Okay. Don't feel bad. I've been working for 6 years and I'm not all that familiar, so we're all right. And then just in case my last name sounds familiar, do we have any horse racing fans out there? Kentucky Derby, anybody watch the Kentucky Derby? So rumors are true, I am the owner of the racehorse Baeza that finished third in the Kentucky Derby, so I will be available for autographs and pictures afterwards. That's a joke. I'm glad half of you got the joke. No, just sharing a last name with that racehorse is the closest I'm ever going to be to owning a racehorse, just so you know. But it was, I almost felt, when I was watching the race, it almost felt like I did own it, because it was that exciting for me. But anyways, just to be clear, I do not have any affiliation with that racehorse. But just wanted to discuss some things on what I've seen as a lender.
I lost money on that damn horse.
Paul, actually, yeah, my buddy here, and that's where I got we were just talking about that this morning. That's how I kind of made up the joke, just sitting here. But what I want to talk about was just kind of some things that I've noticed as a lender, coming from, discussing things with real estate agents, customers, things of that sort, and kind of how we, sharing from the banking standpoint, their viewpoint of what we look at when we're looking on financing on things as land, acreage, rural homes, farms and ranches, things of that sort. So let me see. So the first thing I kind of want to focus on would be the intended use of the property. So this is going to be huge for you guys, just on the fact of knowing where to send your client. Just because we at Rural First, I'll just kind of cover what we do. We do lots, essentially rural real estate, so lots, large acreage tracts, home on large acreage tracts, and kind of your quasi-ag residential properties as well. We also do hunting properties, and not necessarily needs to have a residence on it, but if they're looking out just to have fishing, hunting, a place to hang out, we also lend on those type properties. So the one thing I'd say would be one of the key things here is just what's the intended use of the property. So for example, we cannot lend on anything that's considered commercial or speculative in nature. Anything development-wise, we cannot do that. It has to be either owner-occupied or be for a consumer purpose. So that's huge on, like I mentioned, on your guys' end, just so you know which lender is going to fit that mold for your client. Is it somebody that's looking for, maybe 5 acres to park, their commercial trucks on? That's probably going to be more geared to a commercial type lender, or, someone of the sort that can do that type of lending. Or is it somebody that's going to buy a raw piece of land to build a home on in the future, or, just have a place for a getaway? That's going to be more in our aspect, so you'll know to kind of send them our way as well. So that'll be the huge thing. Or if it's agricultural, if they're looking at, 100 acres to have a hay farm or something, that's going to go my buddy Paul over here, and he's going to be able to help you guys out with that. So that would be kind of my first things, if you're lashing through your list of questions is, what's your intended use of the property? Because just because I can finance land doesn't mean I can finance all the land, even though I'd love to, but I just can't. So, further on that, like I said, Rural First, as long as they have the intent to build or live on the property in the future, we're about 75% of the way there. Chances are we're going to be able to do it. So anything outside of city limits also qualifies as rural real estate with us. So no minimum or maximum acreage requirements there as well. So if it's a 1/4 acre outside of city limits, or 1,000 acres outside the city, whatever it may be, we can lend on it. So also things, if just so happens to be in city limits, we can do it if it's over 5 acres in size. So, or I'm going a huge rabbit hole here. If they're a part-time or full-time farmer, since we are farm credit, our mission is to serve our farmers and ranchers. If they do have gross farm income over $500 reported on a tax return, we can lend it within city limits as well. So, I'm sorry? Like loan term? Just one. Yeah, as long as they have one. Yeah, so if it was prior years and they have just 1 year, we can qualify them based off that. Yeah. So just a couple of things there. Main thing is be utilities as well. So some lenders may require utilities to be connected on a lot, especially in these subdivision type properties. A lot of my experience, I've done commercial lending. I used to be a real estate agent back in the day. I was also a commercial lender with Wells Fargo. I did it at the same time, which Wells Fargo did not like, so I had to give up my real estate license. So, but I've done commercial lending, I've done, construction loans, and now I'm doing the rural real estate. So, for the most part, your commercial lenders, things of the sort, are going to want to see some type of water to the property. So, whether that be via a well, via, being brought in, shipped in, everybody's going to have their own taste of what they kind of like. With rural first, no water, no electric, no septic, no problem. We're going to do it all day. So just raw land, we can do it. But again, just kind of fit in what box you need to put your customers in, because each bank is going to have their own flavor of what they like. So kind of important to see if there's raw land they are looking to build, make sure you know which lender which one to send, because each one's going to have their different requirements. So utilities be huge, and utilities also play a role in, of course, the value of the property, right? So typically your land values. With a well or a septic or electric already connected to it, going to have a little bit more value than just a raw piece of land. So if you're ever listing something, that you may not know more or less, what it could be, in comparison would be, compared to other properties that have those similar type utilities connected, because your raw land is not going to hold as much value as your land that has those utilities connected to it. So. Another key thing on appraisal, yeah, I'm going to touch on that in just a second. Yeah, so structures on the property as well. So when it comes to raw land, just because there's structures on the property does not eliminate it from being able to be lended on. So, for example, with rural first, there can have shops on there. There can be a barn. There can be anything outside of a dwelling. So if there's a dwelling on there, which constitutes of a structure that has, kitchen, bathroom, some rooms, that's going to put us out, because now we're going to have to, for our regulations, we're going to have to disclose that differently as opposed to a raw land deal. So, but just because it has structures, fencing, whatever, does not rule it out of being able to have land financing.
Gabriel, can I add something to that?
Sure.
This is a big point that I hadn't thought about. There are a lot of mainstream lenders. If you have a lot you want to build a house on, if you trim one tree branch, they're not going to lend on it because they're afraid could be a lien on the property. So if they see any structures, you have to warn clients depending on how they're going through for their lending. This is a big deal, and I want to emphasize that. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. And just to kind of piggyback off that as well, on lots that have started construction, 9 times out of 10, lending companies are not going to want to do that, just from a mechanics lien viewpoint is what I'm saying. And that kind of increases the risk, because if there was, work performed on it, as, Lloyd mentioned, 9 times out of 10, the title company may not insure that. So that's how we protect ourselves as a lender, is making sure, we're going to pass that risk on to the title company, because we don't want to deal with that. But if they're able to insure it, we can do it. But typically, once the foundation is poured, that's the hard line. The foundation is, you cannot pour the foundation. So, but other structures outside of that, outside of a dwelling, we can do the financing on. One of the key thing on that as well is, let's say that there is an old home on it that's fallen down, it's dilapidated, it's ruled, it's condemned, whatever it may be, maybe got burned in a fire. Just because there used to be a home or a home-like structure, as long as an appraiser deems it uninhabitable or unlivable, we're going to pretend like it's not there. I'm just going to, we're not going to take pictures of it. We're going to pretend it's not there. It's uninhabitable, unlivable, so we can't call it a dwelling, right? So even though you have your properties that have those type structures, a house that's fallen down, or maybe it's not up to code and code doctor said it can't, nobody can live on it, we're just gonna treat that as a regular land loan. So with all that being said, it's just gonna kind of depend on which lender you work with. But a lot of these things that I'm kind of saying are just kind of some things that we work with on Rural First side. So, and just so you guys know, just a really quick nugget, with Rural First on our lots, large acreage tracts and things, actually all across our products, our minimum down payment requirement is 15%. So we have no balloon payments, meaning, a lot of lenders may, like commercial Wells Fargo, things of those sort, may require that the customer build something right away or package it in with a construction loan in order to get that land financing. With Rural First, as long as they have the keyword intent to build or intent to make it their primary dwelling in the future, we don't care what they do with the property after that. So if they never get around to building, I'm not going to call them 5 years down the road and say, hey, Paul, did you build that house yet? Because your loan's about to balloon. No balloon payments, no prepayment penalties. They can just resume paying on their mortgage monthly, and we're not going to come back and check on things for them. We do offer construction loans as well, so that's kind of our way in the door is we do the land financing in order to get the construction deals down the line. So same thing with our construction loans, 15%. Same thing on our home purchases, 15% down as well. So which compared to your secondary market lenders, like I know CMG was in here, they're going to offer more competitive down payment. But where we really come in handy is on those properties that your ag properties, anything that has ag related, maybe has a pecan orchard on it or a small hay farm, where the home is over 50% of the total value of the farm or the total property. I'm sorry. Your secondary market is typically not going to touch that because it has ag producing on it. So that's where we come into play on your Rural First, and that's where Paul also comes into play as well. So Paul's going to be, and he'll get onto his stuff a little bit more, but he's in the larger scale of ag production. So your larger ranches, your larger hay farms, whatever it may be, where the farm or the ranching production is more of the value, is more than 50% of the value as opposed to the home. That's where Paul would come in. So speaking of structures on the property, and I'm kind of moving fast. I apologize. I want to make sure we get everything in our little time slot. Modular and manufactured home. That's one of the main questions I get when it comes to lending on dwellings. So with Rural First, we're not as competitive on manufactured homes. Our headquarters is out of Louisville, Kentucky, which is ironic because I just mentioned that horse racing joke. But yeah. But we're out of Louisville, Kentucky, and back, over there, manufactured homes are just not that popular in Tennessee and our home states and things of that sort. But when you go to New Mexico, they're pretty dang popular around here. So I'm trying to fight that fight and trying to get that tide turned on saying, there is some marketability here in New Mexico. Those things move; they're everywhere. But I'm losing that fight. But I have a good feeling. I think I'm gonna turn the tide. So we'll see if we can get that going. But the main thing is manufactured don't really have the warm and fuzzies about it. But modulars are great. And if you're familiar with the difference between a modular and a manufactured, a modular, they're very similar, but the difference between a modular is they were never a vehicle at one point in time as compared to your manufactured homes. So the things with the manufactured homes is they're registered with the DMV, they have a title, they are considered a movable vehicle. So what some lenders do is, you deactivate the title, you can take the beams off it, sit on a foundation, boom, and now it's real estate, it's a fixed property. With the modular homes, it never has to go through that process. So just because it's built somewhere else in a factory and it was moved the same way your manufactured home was moved, it was never a vehicle, so now it's just, boom, real property. We're going to treat it the same as a site-built home. So those are kind of the main difference between your manufactured and your modular. So Rural First, like I mentioned, we don't have the best warm and fuzzies. We can do them. We're just going to be at a much higher down payment requirement. But the one thing is we don't require is a foundation. So whether it's a foundation or still on the beams, we'll do it. It's just going to be a much higher down payment. So I just want to kind of stress on kind of the difference between the modular and the manufactured. So single wides seem to be in a whole different type of deal. I've heard of some lenders that do it. CMG, I think, does them if they're on a foundation. Don't quote me on that, but I think. But yeah, there we go. Yeah, single wides. We don't touch single wides, and a lot of lenders typically don't. Foundation, no foundation. Single wides are just kind of on their own little planet. So That's one thing too, is if you do have a lender that does those type lending, I'd encourage you to hang on to that one, because I probably need to find one myself just so I can send these deals off. Speaking of appraisals, I know we did have an appraisal question. The appraisal also is going to have, different, how do I want to say it? Lost my train of thought. Uses, there we go. Yeah. We'll have our as-is value, which is, you can appraise the house on the as-is value, same thing as the land. Or we can also do them as an as-will-be basis, which is going to be, if a customer is going to borrow funds to put maybe build a barn or build a house or build it on. Typically what an appraiser would do at that point is give full credit for the value of the property after those improvements are made. So there's those two different types. Is the as-will-be, which is the value as it currently is, and the as-will-be value, which is the value of what the property will be after those improvements are completed. So, and those can be also included with, your utilities as well. So if a borrower comes and gets financing with land from us, gets a well and a septic put in, we can also do an as-will-be value on just getting utilities connected to that property as well. So the one thing about appraisals is, I get this question. I actually had 3 or 4 agents reach out this morning on, hey, did we get that appraisal order yet? And I know it's important. It is for us too. And when will that appraisal be in? Coming from a banking standpoint, I know the lender is the one to go to, but sometimes the lenders don't even know when that appraisal is going to come in. We can get a date of, May 27th, but I can't tell you how many times it never comes in on May 27th, right? It never comes in on the time they mention that it's going to. So even, I had one the other day that was 2 weeks behind. So from a lending standpoint, that's honestly the biggest factor aside from title. That's one thing we can agree on, right? I think the real estate agent blame the lender blames the agents. But between the agents and the lender, we both blame the title companies. That's the one thing we have in common, right? Throw them under the bus. Yeah, yeah. That's how we connect. But no, joking aside, that's the one thing. And the lender really doesn't have control of the appraisal. I know we order it and we get it done. We hold their feet to the fire as much as we can. But unfortunately, those third-party things we just don't have control over. And they typically don't come in. Sometimes they do come in early, which is great, but sometimes they come in very late. So that's going to be the most, in our eyes, the biggest determining factor of what's the timeline when we get this deal done. So I always tell my customers, I can get you an approval within a week. We can have title within a week, but until we get that appraisal report in, we're kind of in a standstill until we get that. So just to kind of share, and you guys are probably aware of that, but I just want to kind of share, our viewpoint on that as well, is we're kind of at the mercy until we get that appraisal report in.
Gabriel, do you have one close construction loans where you finance the land and also do the construction loan and then a permanent financing all in one? Because
Correct.
That's unusual.
It is, yeah, and it's very beneficial on several layers. Is we do a one-time close. So what that means is whether they own the land or they're going to buy the land with a construction deal and they want to get that all rolled into one, we can do land purchase, construction loan, and mortgage at the same time. Or we can do just construction. If they already own the land, we can just do construction and mortgage. So if they already own the land outright or if they have equity, we give them full credit of the equity they have in their land towards their down payment requirement. So again, with us, it's 15% down on a construction loan, but 9 times out of 10, if they have equity in that land, that can deflate some of their down payment costs. So maybe they only have to put 10% down because they have good equity in their land. Or if there's enough equity, maybe there's no down payment requirement at all, and they can finance some of their fees in that. But the one-time close is huge, just because I did work with another commercial bank, and they had essentially had to close up front on a construction loan, then you had to come back and close on your mortgage. So what does that mean? Typically, you pay double the cost. You'll pay double title costs, right? You'll pay double appraisal because you have to, and that's all passed on to the customer. And then your construction rate is going to be higher than your mortgage rate. So the reason that is because the highest risk during a construction loan is during the building period, right? Because there's just so many factors involved in that, from your builder getting it done on time, to your builder doing a good job, to your builder not scamming your customer, to just weather. Theft, whatever it may be. There's so many factors that contribute to that. So what banks do to compensate for that risk is increase their interest rate. So typically, what I've kind of seen is maybe your construction rate, if you were to build a home now, some lenders may charge maybe 10 to 11% on during the construction rate, right? Which is high. On a one-time close, and I know this with Rural First, on a one-time close, well, the benefit is you only pay those fees once. So we're going to do an as-will-be appraisal, right? Because we're going to value it based on the value of when the home is complete. So it's a one-time appraisal, one-time title, because we're going to do the mortgage and the construction loan at the same time. So one-time title, one-time loan origination fees. So some lenders do get a little stingy, not all of them, but they will charge a double origination fee at the time of mortgage. So that's one of the benefits of the one-time close. And specifically with Rural First is, since we do the one-time close, the construction rate will be your mortgage rate, since we do it all at once. So right now, rates are about 7%. So if we lock you in at 7% for your mortgage, that's going to be your rate during construction as well. So huge savings just on interest there, on top of what you're going to be saving on fees. So as Lloyd mentioned,
that's huge, guys. That is really huge.
It is.
All right, can we hear from Paul on what he does more particular?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Again, a little bit different. Still part of the farm credit system, like Gabe had said earlier. So our minimums that we run into is the minimum acreage. The minimum that we run into is 5 acres, usually 5 acres and up with water rights. Now, if we get on the Rio Grande, I can get away with 2 acres with water rights. We can get into water rights here in a little bit. And then once we get out of town, our what we consider farmer ranch is generally 250 acres. 250 acres and more. Some of those places, if they have elk tags, if they get hunting rights and whatnot, we can get away with less. There's properties in northern New Mexico out in Catron County and such that, there's 100 acres where they'll get 2 elk tags. Well, we consider that ag income. Whether you sell them or not, that's your prerogative, but we can consider it ag in nature. Yes, ma'am. Very tough. It's very tough. If the property has never been allocated for water rights or wells, then you got to go through the state engineer. So what we look for here in the valley, kind of from, let's say, Bernalillo down to kind of the bottom end of Belen, is water rights are pre-1907. Generally, that means you can sell or trade the water right. Obviously, that's the most valuable water right. Now, we also deal with water rights where it's MRGCD. And that's okay. We can deal with those. We can deal with properties on those. The one property we cannot deal with is when it's leased only. So they've owned the property, they sold the water rights off, and now they lease them back. Well, for them, that's fine, and probably 5 out of 10 years they get water rights. Well, the last 2 years they haven't gotten any. So for our purposes, we cannot lend on that. It's got to be an owned water right, either via pre-1907 or the MRGCD.
What about use it or lose it? Is that something you're running into?
I've seen it. I think the state engineer is pretty generous when that comes up. I think that, now one of the things I do notice with the state engineer, if you're trying to move a water right, it's pretty tough. I think those days, it used to be pretty easy where you could sell it to City of Rio Rancho, Intel, City of Albuquerque. I think those days have gotten a little tighter. I think they've tried to keep them, just because we're low on water in the state, and they're not allowing that ease of movement. Now, once you get to your outer limits, let's say in Estancia or where else is some water rights, Stanley, Moriarty area, they don't let you move them at all. Either you've got them for the farm, or they're not going to move them. So a lot of times we run into agents that, well, there's water rights and they can be moved. Better talk to that state engineer first. And we have a very good relationship with the state engineer. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what they can and cannot do. One of the areas that I want to talk about with that is, unlike Gabe, where they're paying for an appraisal, we have our own internal appraisers. So we can go down the hall and I can talk to our appraisers. So generally our appraisers are free. We don't charge them. When you get into ranch and farm stuff, that's a big deal. That's a big savings to the borrower and to your customers. But we also have the real estate agents that understand water rights, they understand property values and whatnot, because they have their own pool of listings and sales that they have. So again, that's kind of a little bit different from Gabe that we do. But one of the things that Gabe touched on that I thought was very important is we can do any farm or ranch. We've got ranches that are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres and farms 2 acres. We're kind of everything in between. we do get into, when it gets over to be 50% of the value of the property, like Gabe mentioned, where the residence is over 50% of the value. Luckily, that's where we lean on rural first, and we run into that on a lot of, especially here in the south of town and up in the Santa Fe and Taos areas, house or horse properties. You know, it's a 40-acre farm. They've got water rights. They've got a beautiful home. That happens more often than not. Unfortunately, I just can't touch it. I understand there's a farm element to it, but that's where we lean it over to Gabe, and they can do it. And it's a perfect fit for their program, but in our eyes, it's more residential in nature than it is farm or ranch. So we bow out of that. And again, I would love to lend on that, but they don't let me. So just one of the things I want to point out, and again, those properties come up more often than not. One of the other things I want to talk about was legal access, and I know Gabe touched on it a little bit. That's a huge sticking point with us, and again, we don't determine it, but the title companies do. We get into a lot of rural properties where if it does not have legal access, we cannot touch it. And I understand a lot of these have physical access. You know, oh, well, we've used that road forever. Well, that's fantastic. And you have physical access, but I cannot lend money without the legal aspect to it. And we've run into some properties, and it happens more often than I even knew. As you get into Sandoval County and even into Rio Arriba, you know, the property gets passed from grandpa to grandson on a napkin. We run into huge problems with that. That just gets to be, and I understand the history of it, and you know, I'm coming from grants myself, so we run into them, but we just can't touch it. It gets to be a problem, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news to those people, but that seller needs to get that access issue cleaned up, and they need to get the hierarchy of ownership cleaned up before they really try and market it, because it's going to be a sticking point for usually the title companies and of course the lenders. So one of the last things I wanted to point out, or two things, I'm sorry. You know, with us, we don't sell our mortgages. He talked a lot about the secondary market. We don't do that. Any loan that closes with us, we keep. You know, and that's one of the intrinsic benefits that we sell over the commercial banks and the community banks more often than not, is we keep the loans. If we make it, we're keeping it. You're going to call me in 5, 10, 15 years, and I think that's one of the marking points. The second thing, kind of tied into that, we're a co-op in nature. We're a credit union of sorts. So that's our whole marketing spiel, is we're not going to fee you to death. We're going to save you money on the appraisals. We're going to try and do that stuff where we can offer that benefit that most commercial banks don't. And we both say it because we both worked in the Wells Fargo world, we both worked in the community bank worlds, and now we're at this side and we get to see that we've got some value that they just don't offer, and we offer the services that they can't touch. So.
Paul, is there any difference in interest rates for like a ranch or a farm?
Well, we try and charge as much as we can. I mean, I got to set.
Well, I knew that.
That's a customer's belief.
Yeah, I mean, if you'll sign the paperwork, by God, we'll get you a week and a fork. But no, of course, I mean, and I think that's a fair question. But no, if you compared us to the residential market, sure, we're probably to a point above. I think that's a fair statement. But again, so in our world, we pay back a dividend. We pay back a co-op fee back to the customer. So we think that rate in the end gets washed out. So we're not much more than a residential thing. We don't have as many options sometimes as they do. I mean, we're pretty cut and dry. We can do a 20-year, I can get up to a 25-year loan. We've got some options as rates. I can't get as creative maybe as even Gabe can, and I definitely can't get as creative as some of the residential stuff. But one of the other things too, and I wanted to point it out because Rick had mentioned it, we do a lot of stuff with the FSA for young beginning small farmers. And on those folks, I mean, and I've done a ton of them, where we do 60% of the loan, 70% of the loan, and then we come in with the FSA to do 30%, 40%. And so they've got a great loan with the FSA because it's a government type backed loan. You know, and I haven't touched one in a while, but I think they're in the 4 or 5 range, if I'm not mistaken. So we're a little bit higher on the first mortgage. The second mortgage is that. We get them in with a no appraisal type of fee, and it really benefits young beginning people that, all in all, they're not going to be able to buy anything like that ever. So I think that's something that, again, we can offer.
Wow, guys, what a couple of great resources. Make sure you write down their information. We had them both up on the screen. I guess before we move on to questions, as sort of our finale, Jorge, do you have anything you'd like to kind of briefly mention title-wise?
Sure. Thanks for throwing me under the bus, guys. I appreciate it. That's what I'm here for. But ironically, Gabe's wife's an escrow officer, works for Fidelity. So I mean, you know, I can't believe he's throwing his wife under the bus. It does never happen. There's no way it would ever happen.
I didn't say I was throwing my wife. I meant I was throwing George under the bus. Jorge.
No, I'm kidding. But no, thank you, Lloyd. Appreciate it. So the only thing I wanted to mention and touch on is marketing. Going out there and looking for clients and trying to find clients that are looking for farms and ranches, we have some tools to be able to help you find those deals. If you're looking for, you've got a farmer that's looking for 200 plus acres, they want it in this specific county, we can actually find that information for you. And if they're looking to have a home on that property, they want at least 2,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single story, we can find that information for them. Marketing becomes a big aspect of what you're doing because you have clients that are looking for something or that are trying to sell something. So getting that information to the resources, I think, becomes a big part of it. Kind of like Rick talked about, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And so you have to get out there to be able to market and get that information out there. One other thing that I'll mention is our database. We have 3,000 plus realtors in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Los Lunas, Roswell, residential, commercial. So getting your either vacant land or commercial properties and farms and land, we can actually get access to those individuals and get it in front of 3,000-4,000 realtors for you. We'll design a flyer for you, we'll create a brochure for you, and get that information out for as little as $5. So to be able to get access to realtors that are in different parts of the state, to let them know that you've got this property that's unique, that's probably going to have this one individual buyer, that's kind of the resource that we can provide. So we're happy to help whenever we can. Flyers, brochures, postcards, getting that information and targeting individuals to help you get your farms and lands either purchased or get them sold.
All right, excellent. Guys, we'll do a question and answer, and I'll bring a microphone around. Well, also, when we're done, there's a few affiliates that will still stick around. I'll stick around. Again, if we go a little over on questions, it's not the end of the world, guys. Appreciate you all being here. I really hope this was very helpful to you. I know we covered kind of some new ground for these Q&As that we do. But that's kind of the idea, is try to throw some stuff out there you haven't heard before and let you learn. So yeah, questions for me or anybody, I'll just bring a microphone around, make it go a little bit easier.
Hi. So what is the significant difference between you two lenders?
Yeah, so, sorry, as Paul kind of alluded, between both of us, we're both in the farm. So our two companies have a formal partnership. So with that, I focus mainly on the consumer lending type. So that's going to be your owner-occupied properties or essentially owner-occupied properties that aren't traditionally, your farming and ranching. So as Paul kind of alluded to earlier, where our difference in financing is going to be is if the residential portion of the property is over 50%, that means your home, the dwelling on that is over 50% of the value, that's going to be in my wheelhouse because that's going to be your owner-occupied consumer type lending. If the operation is more of a ranching, if there's more of an agricultural value to that property as opposed to the residence, that's where Paul will come into play. So ag producing properties, your farms, your large ranches, where the ag operation is more than 50% of the total value compared to the residence, that's where Paul will come into play. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So would you either of you be open to like a piece of land that's going to be subdivided into different lots? Or are you more rural?
So depends on the intent of the lot. If it has to be rural in our definition of rural. So outside of city limits, or in a town or village with less than 2,500 population, we can do it. Or if it's over 5 acres in size, we can also lend it on as well. As long as they have the intent to either build a home in the future, their primary residence in the future, or immediately, if that makes sense. So as long as they have the intent to make it their primary dwelling sometime in the future, we can do it. But as long as it fits those three kind of areas, 85% of the time we're going to be able to do it.
In other words, he's no help for my business.
And
Other
with-
than he
Lloyd.
can lend to my buyers.
Well, and with us, we're going to really shy away from the development stuff because obviously our value and the reason we're chartered is to create farm and ranch. We're not trying to create subdivision to develop it and sell it off in parcels. We're going to really stay away from that. So we will shy away from that one.
All right, got another question over here?
One of the difference, though, real quick, I just want to interject, is that we offer, the Farm Service Agency works very, very closely with preferred lenders, okay? And we will offer a guarantee to the lender up to 90% of the value of that loan, of that note, where the Farm Service, the government, USDA, will guarantee that if that loan goes south and it defaults, they will get paid 90% of that loan. So they have 30% down. They're basically at zero risk to do that. But the lender has to come to us, not the borrower, but the lender has to. That's a program strictly for preferred lenders that we have with the government. And one other thing I just want to mention also is that many times for beginning farmers and ranchers, they have a difficult time coming up with that required down payment. The Farm Service Agency can actually make a down payment loan for you. So Paul had mentioned kind of carrying like a second mortgage. We'll make a loan to pay for that 20 or 30% down that the lender is requiring, so that farmer or beginning farmer rancher can actually go in there with less out-of-pocket money. I think they're only required to pay 5% out of their pocket, and we cover the rest of the down payment. So,
Oh, Nada.
Typically, we can get in with as little as 20%. 20%, I'm on a 15-year note, and then it kind of goes more down longer term. So that's where we start at, though. 20% down, 15-year note.
So Paul, you had indicated it's 15% down for the financing. How far will you go in terms of Gabriel, you said, how long a term is that?
So we can do terms from 15, 20, and 25 years on a lot. On a mortgage, your primary dwelling, we go up to 30 years. So typically how we kind of do it with our lots and acreage is your down payment and your term will kind of line up. So if you went with the minimum 15% down payment, the max loan term you could be with 15 years. They are fixed rates. They're not variable. So our rates right now are about 7.3 on a 15-year. And if you went to a 20-year, that's 20% down. 25-year would require 25% down. So those rates are kind of mid-sevens fixed.
Gabriel, this is to you.
Hey, Steve.
In the South and the Midwest, we're seeing a lot of barn-dominiums.
Oh, yeah.
We're starting to see them more here, but we're
Yep.
having problems with lenders not getting comps to be able to lend on stuff like that.
Great question.
Are you very familiar with them, I'm guessing?
We are. We actually, barn-dominiums are it's our cup of tea. So as long as the barn-dominium, it has over, and most of them are, generally people call just a metal structure home a barn-dominium. But as long as the livable space is over 50% of the total structure, we're good. We can qualify that as a primary dwelling. So with rural first, since all we do is a rural real estate, your lots, your acreage, those type dwellings, even dwellings that don't have, for example, out in Madrid, Cerrillos actually, sorry, we did a property, it had outhouses, didn't have, interior bathrooms, had solar, no septic. We can do those wonky, little crazy, off-the-grid type properties. But on the barn-dominiums, yeah, we do have specific. Over time, we've kind of compiled a conglomerate of appraisers that specialize in those type properties. So we do, like Paul mentioned earlier, we do have a third-party system where appraisers can come in on a kind of a trial basis and do some work for us. And if we like them, we'll keep them. If they're not what we're looking for, we kind of send them off. But they do kind of come to work for us, but they are geared around rural real estate, barn-dominiums, those type properties.
Wow, that's amazing.
And with Farm Credit New Mexico, and not that we get into these as much, but mobile homes don't matter, barn-dominiums don't. I mean, if the property's got the value, we do them all the time. That doesn't affect us at all.
All right, got a question up front over here. I'll work my way across.
I have so many questions, but I'm going to start with one for Michelle. Well shares. I'm seeing more and more well shares, and I'm just wondering, do all the owners have to sign off on the inspection for a well share? And what about metering, if you can comment on that at all?
We've never had a situation where all the sellers would sign off.
All the owners of the well? Like
Yeah,
all the people?
yeah.
Oh, you don't have to?
You would have to have that, but we've never encountered that. We've never, I'm not sure whose responsibility it would be to get that contract signed by all of the owners in order to make that happen. I mean, are you saying it would be the Realtor's responsibility to get all of those signatures?
Well, I'm just wondering, in order for you to do an inspection on a well share, do you need all the owners that are on that well share?
I
No.
would say yes. You would
would say-
absolutely have to have everyone sign
Sign
off.
off.
And then it's a problem because we are not going to know who legally should be signing off on it.
Well, we have
So
the well share agreements that show
okay.
us. But I'm just wondering, because often then it brings up the whole metering thing, especially in Santa Fe County, which is where I work a lot, and it becomes where people don't want to have that conversation, so I'm just,
Yeah, we've never had an incident where we got all of the owners to sign off on it. We've
Okay.
never had one of those.
oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And then I would like to ask one more quick question about developed land. Like, I never know how to comp it. It's so interesting because if something is developed, if it has a well, like I had something that it was vacant land, they added a well, so we added the cost of the well. I wanted, does that sound appropriate? Just adding the cost because they just put the well on and,
Depending on the area, typically what I've seen, and when it comes to those appraisals, you're not going to get probably dollar for dollar what the cost of the well or septic was.
oh,
I've seen some areas, so like in the mountainous areas, I mean, if you drill a well, I mean, you could be drilling forever, and it could be north of $40,000-$50,000 to drill a well, but, having that well maybe it's going to add a value of maybe $10,000 to $15,000, just depending on the area and how much work had to go into that. So same thing on our kind of our farm and ranching things as well is, just the cost doesn't equate the value. So it's going to be, I hate to kind of weasel my way out of the question, but it kind of depends on the area, the cost, and
So-
essentially the,
basically
location,
as vague
location,
as I thought
location.
it was. Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
but yeah,
Thank
dollar
you.
for dollar, it doesn't equate, unfortunately.
He really weaseled his way out of that one.
Well, I may not have heard you mention this, but then I'm old, so you can't expect me. I have a question for any one of you. What do you consider rural? What size the property must be and what kind of area? And I'm thinking Corrales is a perfect example. They consider themselves rural, and boy, they are. But they are 1 or 2 acres, and they cannot be any smaller than the 1 acre.
So in Corrales, I've actually done loans, so we can get away with the 2 acres with water rights. Now, if it's got a home on it, it's probably going to jump into Gabe's score because I'm sure that value of that home is much larger than 50% of the overall value. But we can get away with as small as 2 irrigated acres with water rights. Outside of that, we get into the ranches, and then we get into 250 acres.
Yes, they have water rights. That's
Right.
why when you were talking of that.
Yeah, so no, we can lend on that. The only thing is there's a caveat in there, and again, like Gabe, I hate to weasel out of it, but we call that land in transition. If I can lend, I can lend on 2 acres in south of Belen, I can lend up to 80% of that value. If it's within a residential area like we consider Corrales, South Albuquerque, I get restricted to 50% because again, it's more development than what we consider agriculture. And again, not all people consider our agriculture like we do, but I've got a boss that tells me that. So.
Well, the reason I question this is that Corrales is starting to allow the, what would you call it, casitas in the back in that same area of 1 acre or 2 acres. Would they be able to get a loan for that extra property, that casita?
So with rural first, it kind of depends. And I'm going to actually ask a question back to you guys, because you guys are more familiar. So I've gotten different responses, but I've seen where Corrales is considered more of an agricultural kind of rural property, but the population exceeds, I think, 8,000. Is Corrales, is it within city limits of Albuquerque, or is it its own municipality?
It's its own.
It's its own municipality? Okay, so that's a question I've got. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. So with that, since it's, I think the population for sure is north of 2,500, we would require the property have to be at least 5 acres for rural first to be able to get in. So with Paul, now if there's ag and something he can hang his hat on with water rights or production, chances are they could do it. But with rural first, since we're doing the owner-occupied consumer dwelling, consumer type lending, it would have to be over 5 acres to lend within Corrales. Yeah.
Okay, could you clarify the acreage minimum in rural areas and
Yes.
loan minimums? How low
Great
of a
question.
loan and how small of a property?
Yeah.
Because we have like the Belen-Manzano Expressway area
Yeah.
where there are tons of lots there for sale that have no infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I know Rio Rancho is considered a city, but at what point is out of the city? Because there's lots of land to the north as well.
So anywhere outside of city limits, there's no minimum or maximum acreage requirement. So we could do a half acre, quarter acre, whatever it may be, as long as it's outside of city limits. Where we get into the minimum acreage requirements is within city limits, so over 5 acres. But we've done a ton of stuff around Belen, Los Chaves. Monetary loan amount, about $25,000. And I say about because after a certain while, our fees and what they're going to pay for appraisal and title and stuff, and down payment, you're kind of getting into, well, they probably should just pay cash for it. So we kind of market about $25,000 on as far as minimum loan amount. Not with us. So no, so one thing with rural first, so we require no inspection. So we're not going to require the well, septic, the house inspection. We encourage that, or the agents may encourage that, of course, to protect their buyers, but we don't have that. So we wouldn't have, as far as, drilling a well or anything, we wouldn't have any.
So guys, the question was, do they care about whether it meets the minimum size for a septic? And he basically said, no, that's basically not something they're determining, but that's a buyer beware for your buyer is that, are they gonna have a problem with something like that? Guys, I'll take 2 more questions and then what we'll do is we'll adjourn because it's getting late, but I think some of these folks will hang around for a few minutes if you have a few more questions.
Hi, my question is for any of you on the current property we're looking at. I don't need quite the distinction between the wells. The property that we're looking to put up for sale has a well for the house, a well for the animals that are housed, and then a well for irrigating the permanent pasture. Now, do we have to have all 3 inspected? And does it make a difference in the buyer?
So
on their loan.
With rural first, we require no inspections. So whether if they want to, great, we're not going to require it. We also don't require surveys. So unless title requires it. So unless title requires a survey due to maybe an old legal description or something or a discrepancy, that's the only time we would follow suit. But Paul might have a different answer on that as far as the wells, but we don't require inspections on the wells.
Jorge, do you generally require a survey even on a big rural land, don't you, or not?
Typically we will, and it's better for the buyer to know what you're getting, what your boundaries are, and where that comes from. So it's a little bit safer to be doing it that way.
All right, guys, I'm going to do one more, and then we'll adjourn. And again, affiliates can hang out in the back a little longer. Panelists can hang out a little longer.
This is a question for Michelle from Beyond Inspections. What is the inspection that you were talking about that you ran water? Like you...
When we inspect a well, in order to determine the function of the well, we do what's called a flow test. And the flow test requires that we empty hundreds of gallons of water out of that well. We have to get to the bottom. Any well that we would inspect would require the flow test.
All right, guys, again, the experts will hang out there left. Looks like we lost one, but can you get a round of applause? I hope everybody learned some. Hope it was worth your 2 hours this morning. And now, go out and sell some real estate.